Black-tailed prairie dogs, although small in stature, have an enormous influence on their local ecosystems. Not only do they provide food for a wide variety of predators such as the pronghorn antelope, bison, and the critically endangered black-footed ferret, black-tailed prairie dogs also positively contribute to their surrounding vegetational communities. Because of their inherently imperative role in their communities, scientists classify black-tailed prairie dogs as a keystone species, meaning that without their presence, the entire North American prairie ecosystem would collapse. Black-tailed prairie dogs can be found from northern Mexico all the way up to the Canadian-United States border. They prefer to live in narrow strips of short to mid-grass prairies. They are often found occupying areas near river flats or around areas where sagebrush, greasewood, and prickly pears grow. They are almost never seen in dry areas. Prairie dogs have always been viewed as pests by farmers and ranchers, who worry that the prairie dog's burrows are a walking hazard for their livestock. They also believe that prairie dogs eat the vegetation that their horses and cattle graze on. However, studies have shown that leg fractures from livestock accidentally stepping into prairie dog burrows happens very rarely. Additionally, in 1996, researcher J. L. Hoogland concluded that excavations and clippings by black-tailed prairie dogs, as well as their above-ground scats, enhance the growing conditions for certain plants so that American bison, pronghorn antelope, and livestock can commonly prefer to forage at colony sites. There is also ample evidence that millions of American bison coexisted with billions of black-tailed prairie dogs even as recently as 150 years ago. American bison and cattle have incredibly similar dietary habits, so naturally, the coexistence of cattle and prairie dogs should cause both species to flourish. These misguided beliefs began in 1902 when the director of the Biological Survey, C. H. Merriam, suggested that prairie dogs reduce the productive capacity of land by around 50 to 75%. These suggestions were immediately accepted and were used to justify the eradication of all species of prairie dogs for years, a predicament that Dunello Meadows would classify as seeking the wrong goal. The Pine Ridge Reservation even eradicated over 185,000 prairie dogs between the years 1980 and 1984, a process that cost the reservation over $6 million. However, Merriam's findings, which can be considered responsible for a 98% decline in the geographic distribution of all four species of prairie dogs, are now believed to have been extremely misleading and exaggerated. Studies have concluded that it takes around 300 prairie dogs to eat just as much vegetation as one cow with a calf. Because the black-footed prairie dog is a keystone species, its declining population rate directly affects the population rates of other species, most notably the black-footed ferret, which is considered to be the most endangered species in North America. 90% of the black-footed ferret's diet consists solely of prairie dogs. They also use prairie dog burrows for shelter. Efforts by farmers to eradicate prairie dogs consequently eradicated black-footed ferrets as well. This is ironic because if the farmers truly wanted prairie dogs off of their land, all they would have to do is promote the conservation of black-footed ferrets. A single ferret can eat up to 100 prairie dogs per year. Although recent conservation efforts have seen an increase in black-footed ferret populations, there were recorded to be only 18 left in the wild in 1987. Other species of animals that are heavily dependent on prairie dog populations include ferruginous hawks, great horned owls, golden eagles, badgers, swift foxes, coyotes, cottontails, and mountain plovers. With so many species depending on black-tailed prairie dogs, their declining numbers represent a perfect example of a tragedy of the commons system trap. Farmers and ranchers use a variety of measures to eradicate prairie dogs, most of which are incredibly harmful to the environment. Although it is illegal in the state of Colorado, many ranchers use explosives containing a mixture of oxygen and propane to destroy prairie dog burrows. Other methods of eradication include pumping carbon monoxide gas into burrows, as well as dropping poisonous food pellets around prairie dogs' feeding grounds. There are, however, more sustainable ways in which one can rid their land of prairie dogs. Gay Balfour, owner of Doggone Prairie Dog Control in Cortez, Colorado, practices one such of these methods. Balfour refuses to use traps, poison bait, or poison gas, claiming that everything down the hole dies. All the crickets and beetles, and the bugs, all the tiger salamanders, the mice, everything that's down the hole dies, along with the prairie dogs. Balfour uses a homemade foam mixture of soap and water that he pumps into the burrows. Stunned and bleary-eyed, the prairie dogs instinctively flee out of their burrows, where Balfour catches them by hand, virtually completely unharmed. He then sells the prairie dogs to black-footed ferret conservation programs, who use the dogs to teach captive-bred ferrets how to hunt so that they may be properly and responsibly released into the wild. Population decline of black-tailed prairie dogs affects our economy because eradication efforts are incredibly expensive and cause adverse effects for those in the agricultural industry. It affects equity because it causes many other species to decline as well and will likely cause some species to go extinct, preventing future generations of humans from ever knowing these extraordinary animals. It also affects the environment because of the rapid decline in animal populations, as well as because of the immeasurable damage done to land through explosives and poisoning methods, which are still responsible for the death of 80,000 prairie dogs a year. In order to reverse the system, an entire shift in paradigm would have to occur. Agriculturalists would need to be adequately convinced that black-tailed prairie dogs are not pests at all, but actually positively benefit land and livestock. I believe that the most effective leverage point that could reverse the negative aspects of this system would be through replacing one balancing feedback loop with another. Farmers and ranchers could take it upon themselves to list their land as conservation sites for black-footed ferrets. After ceasing all other eradication efforts, having black-footed ferrets on their land would reduce the number of prairie dogs, but not to an irreversible extent. A small colony of prairie dogs controlled by a family of black-footed ferrets would still allow prairie dogs to inhabit the land and aerate the soil, and would do so in a way that is neither harmful to the farmer's profits nor to the environment.